Since independence, Uganda has not had a peaceful transition of power from one leader to another. Now, all leaders that have ascended power since then did it through use of violent means. The whole situation has been characterized by mass exertion that we should be having at this moment. And we noticed that recently when Honorable Norbert Mao was made Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, he's been talking about national dialogue for a long time. And I put it to you today, is national dialogue a solution for whatever situation we are in? Is national dialogue the way forward? I want us to start from that very particular point. Is it the right time for us to have national dialogue? And I will start with you, Joseph. Joseph Ochieno, very good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Indeed, thanks for having me. I'm sorry I am not on video because because where I am, I'm at a major national function in Teso, but I'm not able to use a table. But yes, I'll be here brief, but it's a fantastic and important point. I just want to say that as it happened, the Vice President of Uganda was in attendance, actually just left not so long ago, so I was glad that the timing was okay. And part of the conversation, which was being talked around, this elder statesman for whom we're having the final ceremonies of his life, who we passed last year, part of the issue was whether or not we're able to come together as Ugandans and celebrate the lives of many of these very important sons and daughters of this country. I think you're absolutely right that national dialogue is a matter of urgency for this country. I think dialogue, in principle, is something that all of us Africans should embrace, particularly African youth going forward. But just a quick correction, except of course at independence, when of course the instruments of power were handed to us, it was through a multi-party election. So we can say that that was a peaceful handover because we successfully negotiated as Ugandans, in fact, across various Ugandan identities and nationalities, various Ugandan communities, and so the various political parties in this country. So if we did that on independence and actually got ourselves involved in free and fair multi-party elections, and there was consensus that whoever won the elections went ahead and formed government, which indeed it did happen, to the extent that we even went ahead and sought for a government of national unity, except it did not happen, but we ended with a coalition at independence. The point I'm making here, Lynn, is that it is actually possible for Ugandans across the various identities, nationalities, communities, and indeed interests to talk, dialogue, and resolve our problem and actually embrace the contemporary body politic, where really it's one in which people come on table and we're able to serve all our citizens of our countries. Of course, we had a military coup in 1971, which was about a year leading to fresh elections. In 1979, you would say that Amin was overthrown militarily. The body that was then the interim parliament, the National Consultative Council, sort of diselected Yusuf Lule, but there are no guns and bombs, but they resolved because they're the ones that elected Lule, and Lule left, and they replaced him with Godfrey Benice. I'm putting a context here. Benice was again then replaced, by the very same organization with a collegiate presidency, 3 presidents. Except, of course, then the military commission, which was not necessarily the presidency led by Paul Mwanga, was perhaps the more powerful element of it, and they went through and they organized the 1980 general elections. 1980 general elections, after it was successfully concluded, actually, you could say there was a relatively peaceful transfer, although Benice was under house arrest in State House. They danced the night over with Milton Obote in State House before he left, and then eventually left and went his own ways. So in a way, that was actually a peaceful handover because it was an outcome of a free and fair competitive multi-party elections. Your question, and our important question, is it possible for us to go through this process considering what has happened in the last 36 years? If you look at that and you find key leaders, people who hold instruments of power, people who have guns, people who have economic and military power, people who have political power, people who influence identities and communities, including kingdoms and others. If there was a resolution that this is what we want, enough, because the most party now controls the instruments of violence, which is the military, But if there was pressure, and if this guy dreamt and woke up in the morning and said, "Look, Ugandans, we need to be able to sit down and talk," it is actually possible because we ever had it in this country. Do you know what? Except for that, I don't know what else, because the Museveni regime would always go ahead and argue they normally have elections, and it's up to you to do whatever you want. We know that in many of these elections, these elections are contested. We know by and large these elections are fraudulent. And we know, obviously, even Mr. Museveni's own legitimacy is contested because he did not come through into power freely and fairly in 1986. Now, the context of Norbert Mao, my good brother, I actually strongly suspect that Norbert is pushing the national dialogue agenda as a means and ways of justifying his taking in the Democratic Party into, if you like, a coalition with NRM, which is not necessarily anything bad, so long as, and if only they're honest with the citizens of Uganda. Because if it were the case that it was something that he was committed to, Mr. Museveni was committed to, and they had conversations over it, what a fantastic opportunity it would be. But I suspect it was not really the original thing as designed by Mao, and I think Mao knows it, and it's definitely not the thing for the NRM. I think the only way in which, therefore, we are going to be going through this is other Ugandans who, like yourselves, and particularly young Ugandans, to continue to demand for an opportunity for, you can call them, I don't like that, bit of handshakes, where people from across the political divide, perhaps there is less toxicity of politics and opposition and differences, but that there is an element of recognition that we're all citizens of this country, across the political divide. But actually, that when it comes to the future of this country, there is consensus that it is not going to happen except through all political parties and organizations coming together for a new settlement like the one that led us to independence. And that is one for which there is perhaps a national conference, because dialogue then will be vague. But I think we need a national conference extremely urgently, where all political parties, where all religious organizations, key religious organizations, all identities, including particularly all major kingdoms, and all interested parties, civil society organizations, sitting together, retired important people like retired justices of the high courts, seated around and simply say that, well, there is a new Uganda National Conference, a recognition that Mr. Museveni will be the strongest at the moment militarily, a recognition that Mr. Museveni will claim that he's got a democratic mandate. We can even allow him to have that, but that we're all seated together and beginning to address many of these other things in a manner in which we are seeking the future. But I believe underlying that and at the center of this will have to be lean, young Ugandans and young Ugandan, or predominantly young Ugandan women like yourselves, meaning whether students, workers, young lawyers at LDC and others arguing around simply saying that, well, you guys, we see where we're coming from, we understand where we're coming from, we don't like what we're seeing at the moment, the future is ours, we believe that the only way for us to be able to find a guaranteed future for ourselves that you, Bazay, particularly, are going to live for us, or want to live for us, or trying to entrench on our throats today, is to begin to have dialogue. And that dialogue will begin with the national conference. Let's all go to Nachivubu Stadium, as I said, our traditional stadium. Or we could go to Nelson Mandela Stadium, and all of us gather down there, get angry, let's not slap one another. Get very angry, speak everything else, vent, cry, hug, hold. But at the end of the day, simply say, we've had enough. And Ochieno and Lynn have called themselves each other names, hug, and embrace, possibly even after you and I are fantastic friends, we can actually hug and play neutral and realize that, well, after that, there's an element of healing, including, of course, at the heart of that, truth-telling. That is going to be more likely done by younger Ugandans than possibly people above my age. I'm sure Miriam would like to, above my age, my age and above, Miriam will want to tell me that, who are possibly interested in a particular way. But I can tell you, this thing is not really about age quickly. It's really, really, really not about age. It's about our values and convictions. The older leaders and Africans tend to be, the wiser they tend to be. I'll tell you about Ted Heath, the British Prime Minister who gave us Idi Amin. towards the end of his life, he was the most sensible member of parliament in Britain, much more left-leaning than the Labour guys. You know, the likes of the Nelson Mandelas, and I can tell you, of course, you guys, some people don't want to hear this. Milton Obote, towards the end of his life, a fantastic guy. I was absolutely privileged to be able to associate with him. And you know what? He always told me, Joe Youth. And even when I was getting the mandate to reform and do mainstreaming of youth and women in the party, he told me, Joe, make it 30, meaning at the branch level, when we're actually making a proposal of making a 30% mainstream of young people and women to the party. But 30 meaning a branch executive of 27, who was saying, put 30, all of them young people, meaning that is how much of an old man about closing to his life and his death, recognizing the import of young people in the institution. And in fact, I was laughing because he was being very unrealistic because it couldn't fit him down there. So these things are possible. This is what we need to do. But I want to repeat, it will have to be young people pushing this agenda.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Joseph, for that. Interesting. Actually, you've given us a background to most of the things that have been happening. Now, Francis, as Norbert Mao champions this talk of dialogue, national dialogue, the national dialogue agenda, it has been rumored that the opposition ought to start the dialogue within themselves, because many times they're the ones who are, faced by lots of challenges, including their activities are always marred by violence. So the question here is our opposition really ready for dialogue?
Thank you, Lynn, and fellow panelists, and I would like to thank Joseph for really doing a good job in opening up this debate and giving the preamble of our country, because that is even clear in the 1995 Constitution, and I don't know whether the current government really attaches meaning to that preamble, because it speaks a lot in as far as where we'll be heading is concerned. Lean back to your question. I think it would be a mistake to think that the whole issue of democracy, the whole issue of civil liberties, the whole issue of having a Uganda that works for everybody is absolutely the role of the opposition. That whenever we raise issues that this is not going right, so then we are as if we are the crying babies on the block. No, but as we go forward about the dialogue, I have a series of issues to all questions. So we want to dialogue with who? And about what? And who is going to mediate? And what is the anticipated outcome? And how will the dialogue be different from other dialogues? So these are questions that we keep asking ourselves. But when I come to what brought us to this, where we need to have a dialogue or where things have run out of hand, then I go back to the NRM government, where I have always said that the words of Peacock suits the NRM government, that they have learned nothing and have forgotten nothing. Let me just pick out the 10-point program. Among them, I'll pick number 3, unity and elimination of sectarianism. That was one of the reasons why the government of Ambassador Mayega went to the bush. Now, while sectarianism was more of something to do with a handful of maybe people leading our political affairs and so on, but this government, this current government, replaced it with nepotism and hegemony, where just a section of people, it is now a club of families and friends. So you see that indeed, if we are to go for a genuine dialogue, that is something that is very important. But because the accused again will be the one to arbitrate, I find a big problem there. Let me pick out also in their 10-point program, number 7, corruption and misuse of power. What hasn't the NRM government done in as far as abrogating their own 7th point that they came up with from the bush? Look at the rampant corruption. Look at the misuse of power, including extrajudicial killings. Well, these would call for national dialogue, but we don't know whether the NRM government itself and its cadres are willing to say it is time, or they still believe they have everything under their control. Let me pick also number 8, where in the 10-point program, they say eliminating displacement and dislocation of populations. Go and look at where the mass evictions have taken place. A government official is at least involved. So I always find it very tricky that even when we are saying we are going to have a national dialogue, and when these guys came into power, they have never realized they are going back to the mistakes they thought they were fighting and liberating the country from. Having said that, I really would say yes, national dialogue would be something very vital and healthy for this country. Only if the ruling government or the ruling party is willing to listen. But if I go back to the president's speech during the 60th independence anniversary celebration, I think it is paragraph number 3. He said the problem of African leaders and is being egocentric. And I 100% agree with him. The president of Uganda and his government, they are egocentric. That's why everything they think about themselves and their families than thinking about Uganda and how it will be in the future. I still find it, I still struggle on, yes, we need the dialogue, but is this dialogue serving the selfish interests of an individual or a clique of people? I would like to hear from what other members can say, and then I'll come in later. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Francis. It's raining here. In case you don't hear me very well, my apologies. It's a bit rainy here. But Francis, thank you very much for that. And it's very interesting because from the DP being an opposition, parties are probably interested in the whole national dialogue agenda, but it turns out some of them are not into it. Now, Ambassador Henry Mayega, having had from Joseph, having had from Francis, the question here is, most times our president has advocated for national dialogue. He says he's always open to dialogue. Whoever wants to have a conversation or dialogue with him, he's always willing. But then we have not seen a positive, move in that direction, save for the new, the DP-NRM cooperation. Would you say, Ambassador Henry Mayega, that maybe the people interested in the dialogue are just, they just like to say the words and not act at all? Ambassador Henry Mayega?
I'm saying, Lynn, that thank you very much for affording us this opportunity to speak about these matters, very important ones for our country. And I just want to say, because in your opening remarks, Lynn, you inferred something that to the effect that the transfer of power peacefully in the country has been very elusive. And I think I had Joseph refer to some examples when power has been transferred peacefully from one person to another. And I just wanted to make my addition, which is that In the early 1960s, power was transferred from Ben Chwanuka to Milton Obote as the first executive Prime Minister of the Republic of Uganda. So we had these transfers before. Of course, the agreement that accompanies many of these things, I mean, a couple of these things which have happened, is something that we can debate about. I was surprised by my friend who, Francis, because the question on the floor is about transfer, but of course he went on a tirade about the Museveni administration and the Mayegas of this world and so on and so forth. The question is very simple. We are talking about whether national dialogue is important for the country so that we can move forward or not. In my view, yes, national dialogue is extremely important. And I can't begrudge anybody who advocates for national dialogue, because dialoguing is a continuous process. It is something that you cannot say can be stopped. And once national dialogue stops, then that's when you begin to hear people talking about picking guns and taking the law into their hands, which is not beneficial for any one of us, including us, who are involved in this conversation this afternoon or morning, as Miriam said, because in the US, I think it is in the morning, still in the morning. Here we are actually in the evening. It is already past 4 in the evening. So national dialogue, and as far as I'm concerned, is extremely important for us, because we want to avoid those despicable scenarios that we had before, when people thought that since there was no dialogue, the next recourse of action was definitely to pick up guns and either do coups or takeovers or think about actually rebel or rebellions. We are past those, and therefore national dialogue is extremely important. But I am not very sure about the cause, the cause for this national dialogue, and also the costs and probably the consequences, or should I say the results of those the national dialogue. Because when I look at the past experiences of national dialogue, there has been some kind of either political uncertainty or political instability. I want to begin with the period between, before 1962, when we were moving towards having self-determination, independence. And therefore, people were airlifted from Uganda, eminent persons from Uganda were airlifted to the UK, just like it was done for quite a number of other African countries, like Zimbabwe and so on and so forth. Ugandans found themselves, eminent persons found themselves in Lancaster House, talking about how Uganda was going to be given self-determination or independence, as many people know it. And so there was that conference which was held outside the borders of the country. So it was quite an experience. And I believe that some people those who attended it should write us books so that we can read about it. Then the next one was in 1979, when we had the Moshi Spirit meeting, which happened in Tanzania and was being sponsored by Tanzania. By that time, Mwalimu Nyerere Julius Kambarage was the president of Tanzania, and we had, of course, what we had. All of us in this conversation, of course, know what transpired, because there was that government of national unity, but there was a stampede, and there was political uncertainty and political instability. And Idi Amin was being fought, and we were nearing, actually, as a country, his removal from power. And therefore, that conference was extremely important. So there was that justification for that that conversation which happened in Moshi in Tanzania. The rest of the discussions or conversations about national dialogue have been muted in a sense, like the one which we had in and I don't want to call those the real dialogues, because it was basically consultation, because there was no organized forum or forums where these things were being discussed. And that was before the coup of 1985, then the takeover of 1986. But I could see an attempt of bringing on board people from all shades of political opinion to form governments. And 1985, you remember the Rutwas took over, and the rest is history. And they tried to bring on board as many people from all shades of political opinion as possible. Just like it happened in 1986, when President Yoweri Museveni took over, bringing on board quite a number of people from all shades of political opinion. That I don't want to qualify those. I think, let me be specific. I don't want to qualify those as real dialogue, but in a sense, people are being consulted on how they should take part in those governments. And therefore, that brings me to the next step, that when should there be need for national dialogue? What are the ingredients of that situation that actually determines as to whether we should have a national dialogue or not? Are there quarrels, like, of course, Francis was trying to talk about all sorts of things which have been happening and so on, and I hope those can qualify the country for national dialogue so that people can conference on these things and then agree on the way forward. So what is, and of course, you need to raise that critical mass to convince everybody who is participating in the politics of the country, and even those who are probably active in as far as politics are concerned. And I think it was Joseph who was talking about the religious organizations and leaders, and quite a number of other political leaders who have retired, and political and I mean opinion leaders in the country. So have we really, can we qualify the situation which is obtaining in the country? And these are some of the questions that we must find answers to, so that we can work out a way forward. Is the situation in the country warranting national dialogue? Are there justifications for national dialogue? If it must take place, what is the agenda? What is the agenda? Is it just mere quarrels, or is it because we don't have a functioning parliament? Don't we have the three branches of government, the executive, legislature, and the judiciary performing their duties very well? So what is this? I would want to be convinced about the agenda for national dialogue. Extremely important. But otherwise, if it's just mere political quarrels, which really don't border on political instability or political uncertainty of the country, I'm not really sufficiently convinced that we need that national dialogue. But for purposes of probably cooling the nerves of those who want it so badly, I think the important one that we can do is to convince as many people as possible so that we bring them on board about the need to have this national dialogue. Now, of course, the political parties in the country are brought together by an organization which is sponsored by donors, so-called donors. I don't want to call them donors myself, but others have called them donors, because in my view, they are not donating anything to our country. These are people who colonized us, and so it is incumbent upon them to make sure that the country remains stable, because, of course, they're still extracting resources from all these African countries and so on and so forth. So I don't want to call them donors, but if they can be that really reasonable enough to find to fund the activities of all those political parties in the country under that umbrella called IPOD, so be it. And in my view, IPOD is still a platform in which we can participate as political parties to come some kind of an agreement on the way things are run in the country. And I want to believe that IPOD is doing its job. Some of the parties have refused to join the IPOD, and therefore they are not part and parcel of the discussions that normally happen under the IPOD umbrella. There are also discussions in the parliament. If that forum called parliament probably is not performing to the best of the knowledge of others, of some, probably, yes, we can discuss that. But the most important things, as far as I'm concerned, are two things. One, is there justification for a national dialogue? Two, what is the agenda? What should we include in the agenda? Those are very critical points, and as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that interesting one. Before I let you go, what kind of situation really warrants the dialogue? Because you're saying you're asking us if that requires dialogue. Is what would require dialogue? Because we still have challenges as a country. We have ethnic problems, we have wars in different places, we have conflicts, we have lots of disagreement. There's a whole lot. So, and people are harboring wounds from before. So certainly, I would imagine that if we sat down as one, would have a conversation. But to you, Ambassador, what justification do we need as a country? What kind of situation would require us to have a dialogue?
Let me start from Europe. I think it must have been either yesterday or the other day in France on the floor of Parliament. I think some hot-headed Frenchman uttered racial remarks on the floor of Parliament against one of the legislators who is actually black. And of course, that is being taken care of under the auspices of the Parliament of France, and they want to discipline this individual. How widespread that is in France or in the whole of the West or Europe, I don't know. And whether that warrants a national dialogue in France, I don't know about that. But yours is a very important question, Lynn. What are those ingredients that are extremely important in as far as the agenda for national dialogue is concerned? And I think I mentioned the two in as far as I'm concerned, basing on the history of Uganda. One of them was political uncertainty and political instability, as we saw it in 1966, as we saw it in 1979, and as we saw it in and around 1985 and 1986. Some kind of dialogue, and of course 1962, of course. 1962, when people were lifted out of Uganda and taken to the Lancaster House in the UK to discuss about how Uganda should be given self-determination. So those are the scenarios, the two scenarios which I think, in my view, can warrant this national dialogue. If it's about land, I think that's just a question of really putting in place pieces of legislation that can address some of these problems, that intractable problems, so to speak. Those can be addressed by pieces of legislation that we have. But when it comes to political uncertainty, and I'm not convinced that we have it at the moment, when it comes to political instability, that definitely warrants national dialogue as far as I'm concerned. Two things. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Ambassador, for that. Miriam, you have heard from Ambassador Henry Mayega and Joseph, and of course Francis. However, the question is, we all differ, of course, ideologically. But there's need. You will hear that there's need. We need to come, together and rally behind our national flag. Somebody was actually arguing, it kind of made sense, that we need not wait for an election. We cannot wait for disaster. Rather, we shouldn't wait for disasters and funerals for us to come together. So the question of dialogue should be around something of common interest. And from the look of things, we are not yet there.
I will start from where Ambassador Mayega ended. What are the conditions that should warrant us a national dialogue? And he himself, I think, mentioned two of them: national political uncertainty and instability. I want to add that, yes, uncertainty warrants a dialogue, and we currently have political uncertainty. Ambassador Mayega, if I can ask you, and if you can do a random survey around Uganda and ask them, what is the future of Uganda after Museveni, and what do they think will happen? Nobody knows. And if you ask them, are we guaranteed a peaceful transfer of power? Nobody can assure you of that, including the UPDF. So that is the political uncertainty and the instability. Yes, we, ever since 2000, we've never had peaceful elections. That means we've never had peaceful transition from one term of the presidency to the next. I mean, I can't call it transition of power because it's been under the leadership of one person. It's Museveni all the way. But going back to that topic, the national dialogue, and as Joseph Ochieno elaborated, let's put it into context first. The national dialogue as it is, and I think as Mao refers to it, has been an ongoing talk and process in Uganda. It was started in 2006 by the RCU, which is the Interreligious Council of Uganda. And that process has had considerable research dialogues across the country from 2016 to 2019, until when they hit when they got stuck. Why? Because the leadership wasn't into that process. So they couldn't move forward, and nobody could proceed even to implement the views that they collected from the population. So the problem died like that. And as Francis asked us, we can have a dialogue, but who's going to lead the process? And before I go, because Museveni and NRM, they are not willing to have that process in place. And I don't know if Mao will be able to convince the president. I mean, NRM party is one person. I can't say it's a party consensus, but normally whatever Museveni says becomes a party's point of view. So I don't know whether Mao will be able to convince Museveni this time to have a dialogue, a national dialogue. But do we have conditions which should warrant us a national dialogue? Yes. And Ambassador Mayega, yes, it's actually an overdue process. We have the political uncertainty, the instability you yourself mentioned. We have regional imbalances, income inequalities. We have really hot conditions when it comes to ethnic rivalries. Today, even the president himself refers to parties like NUP as a Uganda, kind of best party. I don't want to call it like a Baganda best party, but it looks like a form of insurrection, kind of, against the NRM leadership. And then we have other parts of Uganda, like the Rwenzururu, who were uprising because they felt they are left out. And instead of listening to their concerns, the president deployed so heavily and caused like a mini genocide over there. And that's what silenced people, but the issues didn't go away. You don't solve issues by killing them. So the issues that we are bringing up, the Rwenzururu uprising, are still there today, and we haven't discussed them. We don't want to discuss them. Instead, the NRM government and the President Museveni's decision was to suppress that contention, that uprising, but the issues are still there, and we expect them to come up anytime once they get some leadership, or they feel that they can't contain it anymore. So those are the issues. But today, if you are walking on the streets of Kampala in a moment, you hear those grudges. The people say Westerners are taking everything. I mean, they are dominating whatever it is, any power control, positions that make sense, positions that have influence on the economy, positions that have influence in politics, in the military, and everywhere. And people are grumbling, people are discontented. So instead of waiting that discontent to boil up and even become as volatile as the Rwenzururu uprising was, we should have a dialogue and discuss those issues before they are out of control. And another thing which is so very important is, can we have a peaceful transfer of power or guarantee over that? Right now, the Constitution and the Constitution alone doesn't guarantee that. Why? Because the Constitution was weakened, and whatever Museveni wants, that's what becomes the next constitutional statement. Why? He has a rubber stamp parliament, and that also answers Ambassador Mayega's question, saying that is the parliament, has it stopped functioning? We all know the parliament, because the process they are elected into power is highly rigged, is highly fraud. We end up getting the result, which is fraud. We all know, I mean, like the IT people say, garbage in, garbage out. If the process is fraud, you can't expect a good result from that. So it's corrupt. The election processes are corrupted from the way they start, and the end result and the people who are elected are a result of that frauded experience, and they are not representative of people's interests. Why is NRM government so uncomfortable about the dialogue? If we are to, if they have good intentions, you can ask them yourself, why are they so uncomfortable about having a national dialogue? Because they don't want those issues to come up, because ever since the NRM party took over power, actually 2000, when we started having the violent elections, that's when NRM party took over from NRM movement. So ever since then, we have never had a leader who is elected under peaceful and fair elections, and maybe President Museveni doesn't want to confront that truth, which is, what do Ugandans actually want? What are the political wishes and aspirations of the rest of Ugandans? So because today we don't have that answer, the process that was supposed to cover that, which is the electoral process, freedom of speech, transparency, and all freedom of association, all those processes are not happening in Uganda today. We know no political leader of opposition like Bob Wine today can address any public rally anywhere. Why? Because Museveni and NRM leadership doesn't want to confront the reality, which is, what do people actually want? And that is enshrined even in our constitution. The Article 1, the power belongs to Ugandans. But how will the Ugandans express that power if we can't have a conversation with them, if we don't have a national consensus, if we don't have free and fair elections, if we don't have freedom even to associate with each of us, if the political opposition leaders don't have power to consult the people, if civil societies cannot even consult people. Today we know civil societies, if you talk anything political or about the human rights, you are blocked, or others are kicked out, like DGF, which was recently closed by the president. So all those issues, Lynn, are a fertile ground for a national dialogue if we are to avoid a future crisis like what we saw in 1971.
Right. Thank you very much, Miriam, for that. You highlight very interesting issues there, because in as much as we are in denial, I think the glaring issues that warrant really some sort of dialogue, and we ought to pay attention to them. Joseph, you want to react?
Yes, and I would like to apologize by saying that kindly allow me make this as my final submission, because, as I said, I'm really on the road on some other major event. And yet this is something which is extremely important. I thank you very much for having me, and I'm really glad that I was able to be able to be with you guys for however brief a moment it was. I just want to suggest this to my good brother Henry. The rest of you guys might know or may not know that Henry and I come a long way. We were very close colleagues in the 90s and early part of 2000s. Henry, you chose to take another route and join NRM. Henry, I think your generation, my generation, we are absolutely the most critical generation at this material time in this country. It's our job to support Miriam. It's our job to support Lynn and their generation, and for us to be able to be the exemplary leaders for the guys, particularly in their 20s. Henry, you know all the underlying issues. Henry, I know you have difficulties because of the position in which you are, but Henry, also know that by virtue of the positions you held before joining NRM, we know how NRM came to power. And by the way, Miriam, you're being generous. NRM has really not changed from the 1986 as we know it. Names have changed. Nor, in my opinion, has really the structure of the organization changed beyond 1981 or thereabout, when these guys went to the bush. The high command still continues to control. The high command is a limited group of people, and the high command is Museveni and a very particular group of people. And the high command, in effect, is almost certainly Museveni. My plea is this: that people like Henry, and indeed myself, that we should persuade all Ugandans to wake up to the realities of being able to reconcile, being able to know how to win, and win responsibly, and how to lose graciously. But much more particularly, I think the point is this: that the national dialogue, as discussed, the most important pen comes off Mr. Museveni, because he has the burden of responsibility. One, because he occupies the office of state, but two, because he has held that office for the longest time. And actually, most of the biggest crisis since independence has been in the last 36 years of his time, without prejudice. And above all, because he alleged to have gone to the bush to commit an atrocious war in Luwero in the name of seeking to rescue and reclaim the people of Uganda, and perhaps be able to grant us the voice. And so for that reason, he actually stands challenged to prove to Ugandans that he's able to go beyond the self, beyond the personality, and so to be able to sacrifice a little bit of even if it means his ego, so that Uganda is able to sit down and have a conversation. So the question of national dialogue, Henry, I think as in part as Lynn said, as Miriam says, we know the identity challenges, the identity issues in this country. We know there is the resentments ongoing. We know the politics of inequality. By the way, I'm right now in Tesu, and actually listen, I was smile when I hear Museveni's vice president, who's herself from Tesu, talk in a meeting, and we're discussing part of what they're trying to mention is about infrastructure. But I see the excesses of poverty in grass-thatched houses as I was coming to where I am, in here. I've gone around the country, and I keep on repeating this, Lynn. I go around this country, every sub-region. I see the apparent differences. We know the powers that be. I am lucky and privileged enough to have conversation with Henry, and indeed many other, including a minister I've just been having a conversation with today, beyond the vice president, who are NRA. And these people outside cameras, they know and they say and they concede that not only are there issues, but that they know what these issues are. We're simply saying, and I think Miriam is simply saying, let's not wait for the boil to explode. Quick one. Last year's election, that 54 of our citizens died in Kampala. That alone, 54. That is actually unprecedented, in Kampala. The fact that people are quiet, the fact that there are no guns shouting around Kampala, Mukono, and the Kashilingis have gone, may they rest in eternal peace, that no grenades are being thrown around Kawempe. Does not mean that we are in peace. No, people are simply damn scared. People are scared, but people are resentful. And people are resentful across the country. And Lynn, if I may say so, again, I'm very lucky, just as all of us are. We talk to people across this country, including people who come from Kiruhura, and you'll find people who simply tell you that, look, for me, I battle myself and I battle my way in order to be able to manage for a meal or for myself. There's a class, there's a privileged lot across this country. All this country, it's in all our interest that all this country benefits from our national cake. That has not happened under NRA. It's not happening at the moment. It seems to be getting worse. We are now actually trying to emphasize the privilege of the 0.1% versus the 99 point something percent Ugandans as a matter of reality. That is part of the thought we're trying to talk about. So really, look, in Kenya, beyond the challenges of threats to the Hague, beyond the question of the Supreme Court rulings about electoral reforms, Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta did their handshake thing. That was genuine. Both of these guys realized that they needed to be men, men enough, to shake hands and go beyond their personal egos and personal interests and the identities that they represent, in order for them to create a possibility for Kenya in which, in their absence, there is a possibility for democracy, there's a possibility for national unity, and there's a possibility for politics of issues, and there's a possibility that as a young child of Kenya, whether from Kalenjin zone or Turkana, that they're able to thrive in that country relatively freely. It is not perfect. In fact, the last election was shambolic regardless of the outcome. We know that. But by and large, there was an open and deliberate attempt. And I can tell you, as someone who, again, relatively lucky to associate with people from both sides of communities, I know what some people from the Luo community were expressing, almost as if Raila was a traitor to them with Kenyatta. And I also know my friends in the Kikuyu community who are saying, what nonsense and what is this that Uhuru Kenyatta was trying to do. But no, those guys are leaders. I thought it's extremely important that we use that as an example. You know what? The situation in Kenya is not the same in Uganda. Our situation is worse. And Henry, there is even one thing that maybe Miriam hinted. I think I really didn't want to go there in that way. Actually, the fact that Museveni has been one monolithic guy for 36 years, Henry, nearly close to my age, Yeah, the fact that this guy has been here all this time, it just tells you that there is something abnormal. It's not right. It's not right. It's not normal. It's abnormal. To the extent that even if there is a change within NRM, there's bound to be a shock. And to the extent that now people are even able to begin to say that beyond this man, let's now look for his son. You guys, let's look for his son. We're so desperate. We can't go outside this family. Henry, you and I know it is actually abnormal. Henry, you were nearly the president of Uganda People's Congress. And around that time, you remember, before Milton Obote died, all he needed to do was to land here, and UPC was going to go in government. Had the man landed here alive, the policy of this country would be different. And you could easily have been the president of the Republic of Uganda. Henry, don't tell me that now you've lost, you've decided to opt out of ambition to be president. So if we allow one man to go for 40 years and one man to hand over to his son, when is Henry Mayega going to be president? You guys, I want to come to State House, not only to visit the president, but I want to come and visit State House to have a chat with my friends so that we can reminisce and talk about how we used to be as colleagues in the struggle. So that is really important. So no, there is something fundamental in our country, and it does not today. It is urgent. There's no better other persons than the people like you, Henry, who are able to tell Museveni very frankly that, look, we've made the move, the journey, we've crossed the floor, we've come to join you. What are you giving? In NRA, there is this tendency of giving from the other side. That actually for Mr. Museveni, the issue is co-opting people rather than actually sharing table. And Miriam, you and I, there's a forum in which I am with you, where there's some dubious friend of ours, and when they talk about the crossing, come here and I instruct you as your boss. That is a building the bridge thing. No, we need a national building of the bridge. We need to do so urgently. So friends, as you continue with this conversation, to go, I would like to thank you very much, Lynn, for having me. I would like to hope and pray that all of us pray and common sense prevails, and that we're able to persuade, particularly Mr. Museveni, that it's possible for us to do this. Yes.
Somebody is arguing that giving in to dialogue is like a man winning a woman's heart and marrying her only for her former suitors to ask him to give them room, to show them how to make babies.
And the point is?
The point is we shouldn't give in to...
You know what? That's a very interesting point. And I've been very open about this. The point is this, that I know because Museveni thinks he's militarily powerful, which by and large in figurative term he is, because he knows that he's economically powerful, and of course he controls the national economy. And because he knows at the moment, he has the political power because he controls the office of the state. He thinks actually he doesn't need other Ugandans, so we need to operate on his terms. But that's not what governments do, and that's not what politics do, and that's what democracy is. The thing is, you let it boil and it explodes, and then you deal with the consequences. That I warned Henry, I think you were there, 2007. I warned in I think it was Milton Obote's memorial in Bali 2007. I want to say, echo it today, that those of us in UPC deliberately said enough was enough with violence. Enough was enough with violence. And we opted that we're going to continue to seek change in this country through political, diplomatic, and legal means. And that in the very unlikely event that some of us deliberately then opted that we smartened and upped our games and leveled up with Mr. Museveni with violence. I said so that at the time that it was almost certainly the case that I would be a general today or I would be dead. But one thing which was certain was that Mr. Museveni wouldn't be there. So now we decide.
Right. Thank you very much, Joseph. It's okay. We'll let you go. Francis, I see your hand up. What's up?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. And, this is an interesting conversation, but as usual, Ambassador normally think that when I come here, I'm just politicking. Ambassador, these are serious issues. The reason why I chose this time to bring out your 10-point program is to put the truth in your face, to show you that by the time you came up with this 10-point program, your government, and then they decided to go to the bush, it means that conditions were already even beyond dialogue. And that is the benchmark I wanted us to use, that following your 10-point program, each point at 1 point at a time, analyzing it, isn't the ground already showing that you have gone off track and therefore you have to come back to the limelight. If you will go back to your point number 1, it talks about democracy, but is there a correct democratic dispensation? If you went to the bush because you contested the 1980 elections, what about the series of elections that we have had and there has been contestations and people go to court the judicial system you are saying that is working and the results have been zero. Don't you think there is something boiling? Ambassador Mayega, let me tell you this. A person who lives on top of a mountain cannot tell how tall a mountain is, or how high the mountain is, or how broad the mountain is. It's people at a distance who will be able to see that that mountain is so high, or that mountain is so broad. Because you are within, engulfed within the system of NRM and how it works, like everything they do, you are seeing it as juicy, as a bed of roses. The truth is, it's not. And get it from us, who are maybe at a distance observing what is taking place. Like, for example, the extrajudicial killing that I'm talking about. Maybe, Ambassador, you are not seeing it. Okay, let me leave that as aside. Look at when this prominent boxer was gunned down. And the president comes on national TV and says, yes, we killed that one. That itself is very dangerous. Have you ever even talked about talking to the relatives of that person? What are they saying? Have you ever talked about the fraternity of maybe the boxing club where? So that's how these small pieces begins boiling, and they lead to a very huge catastrophe that you can't even withstand. Currently, you are, like as how Joseph said, you may think they are guns and so on, but these can turn to be nothing within a twinkle of an eye, most especially if the masses go out of hand and they decide to use their powers within Article 1 of the Constitution. So it is important for you when you say that it's only when you see political instability and then political uncertainty. I don't know what your definition of political uncertainty. If people are not sure that they can campaign freely, if people are not sure that they can talk freely, if there are a series of different situations where they will come and kill a policeman at a polling station, a police station is banned. So what uncertainty do you want more? Do you want people to reach in Museveni's? If you see that other people were stopped from traversing and discussing matters of national importance, but a member of the first family is allowed and is moving freely, what do you think other people are thinking? When we come to the economy, when you find a person from a certain family is the one dominating the gold mining and so on, what do you think other Ugandans are thinking? So sometimes when the masses are quiet and few of us come out and speak, and then you think everything is okay, it's not. It's not. So if we go, Ambassador Mayega, to every sector of the economy, or every sector of Uganda that makes society, it has issues that would guarantee, and we have been talking about them. That's why we are saying maybe the response that you need so that it guarantees dialogue is what maybe I don't understand from you. And you have given good examples. Your government is well known for abrogating even dialogues. Whenever the dialogues you have talked of, when you were in the bush, your government was in the bush, all the dialogues they would go for to solicit peace, they would breach them. They would not adhere to them. So do you think the only ways Ugandans that exist are only in NRM or NRA? There are no other Ugandans that exist who are wise, like how you used to, maybe how you were in 1980s. No. Look at by the way, even within your NRM, look at the generals that are also disgruntled. So that itself maybe needs a dialogue within yourselves first. First put your house right, then from there we can come and then say, how do we do it at a national level? But for sure, get to know that what used to be a ruling family now has turned into a royal family. Things are not right. It is not healthy for our country. We have to discuss in terms of all aspects that will lead us go forward. Otherwise, it's not healthy, Ambassador Mayega. Whether you bring all the history and so on, provided Museveni is still in power, we are smartly dressed going nowhere. He is not good for them. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Francis. We are smartly dressed going nowhere. I think we have a direction, we just don't know yet, maybe. And thank you for that. Ambassador Henry Mayega, I suppose you want to react to what they have said.
It's a mouthful because everybody is in the opposition. I'm a government, which is good. I'm very happy. Now, I just want to say that, Lynn, are you hearing me? I was in a lecture. I was doing my postgraduate degree at Makerere University, and I asked a question to my professor that what is political, because he was talking about political efficiency, and I asked him about political efficiency. My question was, how does political efficiency manifest? And listen to what he told me. He said, political efficiency is about keeping power for as long as you can. I'm now telling you the brutal facts. I'm telling you, if you want, you can take it or leave it. I'm telling you the brutal facts, my sister Lynn and the rest. The brutal fact, in as far as political efficiency is concerned, according to that professor of political science at Makerere University, is that you keep power for as long as you can. The rest of the questions, I can give you his address and you ask him, because he's still at Makerere. Now, of course, Francis has made reference to quite a number of things, including the killings, that because there are killings in the country, and therefore there should be national dialogue. Of course, it is bad that Ugandans, some Ugandans are getting killed as a result of really people who take the law into their hands. But I wish Francis could also make reference to the attempted murder of General Katumba Wamala. But when you talk about only the opposition who have been targeted by probably errant members of the security forces of the country, and you exclude the rest of the attempted murders on people who belong to the NRM, including the nailing of both hands of an NRM supporter shortly before the elections of last year, including the beatings of women who were clad in yellow because they were NRM and therefore they were targeted by NUP, including erecting illegal roadblocks by NUP and their goons on the roads, and then, of course, torching roads and so on and so forth. And you expected the security forces in the country would just fold their arms and massage the culprits who were involved in those kinds of activities. That is not the country in which I wish to live, where people take the law into their hands and they do all manner of things, bordering on breaking the law, and then the security forces just look idly by as these things are happening. Now, let me say this for a fact, for once. That, of course, NRM is not a part of angels. I hear in heaven there is Angel Gabriel and so on and so forth. NRM is not a party of angels. People are clad in white, and therefore they are supposed to perform things to the best of the expectation of the electorate or Ugandans. No. There are so many good people in the NRM. There are also so many bad ones. And all that matters is how does the party called NRM, just like the rest of the parties, manage that kind of deviant behavior. I also want to say that amongst the opposition in Uganda, there are many people who are very bad. And therefore the opposition is not really a canvas that has only angels. If we want angels, then we go to heaven. Not here. And therefore, you'll find so many people who are actually crossing paths really crossing the red lines of the law in the country amongst the opposition, just like some in the NRM. So there are no provisions for everybody in the NRM to be an angel. There are no provisions for everybody in the opposition to be an angel. If you aren't angels, you go to heaven, not here on earth. There are many good people in the opposition. There are also many bad ones in the opposition. There are many good people in the NRM. There are also many bad ones in the NRM. Now, given the fact that you find both bad people and good ones across the political spectrum, you expect that definitely there is going to be a lot of deviant behavior. Now, when political parties are recruiting membership, let me tell you what, because I've been belonging to these parties for a very long time, and I'm happy that Joseph made a reference to that. I was the whole vice president of the UPC. I have not been very small in that country. I've been big, except that I left that party because the roof was leaking. The roof was leaking, and therefore I couldn't stay in a house whose roof was leaking. And leadership was being passed on from, let me leave that for another day. So, what am I trying to speak about? What I'm trying to say is that you'll find deviant behavior in all political parties. And therefore, that means that the point of entry into a political party, this is now pure political science, but also practical politics, that entry into a political party does not sieve out those who are cannibals, those who are thieves, those who are murderers. A political party's numbers is what matters. That you want to go to an election, and therefore you want numbers, and you will not have that point of entry, or supporters deciding to support you. That because this one is a cannibal and therefore you should be stopped. This one is a murderer, you shouldn't cast a vote for you. That doesn't happen in a political party. I have been in these political parties, and therefore I know how they actually admit membership. When I was getting my membership card, it is Milton Obote who signed it. In Zambia, Lusaka, not even in Uganda, in Zambia, Lusaka, he was already an exile. And he didn't ask me any questions about as to whether I was an errant person in terms of behavior. There was no such a question. And I want to believe that even when it comes to admitting other people into political parties, those kinds of questions are not asked. And therefore, you expect that some people are definitely going to be. And I'm not trying to justify errant behavior in any one political party. But the point which I want to make is that in a political party, you will find this kind of deviant behavior. Now, my sister Miriam made a reference to political uncertainty in Uganda, that we don't know what is going to happen when President Yoweri Museveni actually leaves power. Let me say this for a fact, that President Yoweri Museveni is not mortal. Is not, in other words, this is not a person who's going to be there forever. If he went today, the pathways for succession are provided, and Uganda is not a monarch. I want to say that. The pathways for succeeding the president, are provided in the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, and that is the vice president becomes the president. If not, then the Speaker of in that order, the Speaker of Parliament, if the vice president also so happens to be indisposed. But otherwise, the pathways are provided in the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. That if President Yoweri Museveni left power today, abruptly, the vice president, who is a person who has been referred to by Joseph, takes over the reins of power in that country. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, that uncertainty is settled. Now, because I also had a reference to President Yoweri Museveni's son being fronted by some to be president, that is, in as far as I'm concerned, their democratic right to front Muhoozi as president in 2026. There is no law that bans anybody, including my sister Miriam or Lynn or Francis or Joseph, from contesting in those elections, not even the son of the president. There is absolutely no provision in the Constitution that bars anybody from contesting for president. But I've also seen that others are now also endorsing President Yoweri Museveni to stand in 2026. So, who is telling the truth? Is it those who are fronting his son or those who are fronting him as president? Of course, for me, I am going to support my president for president in 2026 because it is very clear. So, the fact of the matter is that the Constitution provides pathways for succession if the president abruptly left power. If he so chooses that he stands down at the end of this term as president, there are provisions in the constitution that spell out how we select or elect a president. If it is before the 5 years elapse of his term, then the ruling party will have to pick somebody, and that is the vice president. But if he doesn't contest in 2026, then each one of these political parties in the country is going to select who becomes their flag bearer for president. So I don't see political uncertainty as far as that is concerned, because in my view, these pathways have been provided. Now, there was also a reference to the NUP being referred to as a Baganda party. Well, that is a matter of conjecture. I don't know. But in the public domain, it is being talked about by quite a number of people that the party is terribly sectarian. And this sectarianism has not begun today. And that's why I love history. Because in the early 1960s, it also happened because it led to what was called at that time Kabaka Yeka. Kabaka Takubaku Kalulu, 1962. You don't vote for Kabaka. No. So he must become the president. And the rest is history. Of course, what happened is that Edward Mutesa became the president and the prime minister became the executive prime minister. If we are going to avoid this history, we are making a mistake. Otherwise, the English say that history repeats itself. So Kabaka Yeka came into being as a result of the tribalism, and I must say it here, and just like I've said it over and over again, that tribalism has been rearing its head for a very long time in my central region where I come from. And the moment you make that mistake of bringing that tribalism into the politics of the country, there is always a price to pay. Because the rest of the regions in the country are going to gang up naturally. And I've seen it happen. In the 60s, it happened. And even in the last elections, I saw it happen. That because NUP was perceived to be sectarian, driving the, and hyping the aspirations of the central region, others got estranged from it. Probably they would have supported it. But because people are making a mistake of making a political party specific to a region, it has, let me say it here, it has a political price to pay. And the political price to pay is that the rest of the regions in the country will gang up against you, just like they did in 1962, and they ganged up against a region because of sectarianism. If I don't say these things, nobody will. I'm not a Muchiga, but I say facts. Those who want them can take them. Those who don't want facts, fine. That is their problem. It's not my problem. I tell you the facts. So
Ambassador, let me read some reactions here.
Nobody should form a political party on the basis of regions, of tribe, or religion, because we have so many of those in the country. We should avoid them as much as possible. Thanks very much, Lynn.
Ambassador, here are some comments in the chat room. Now, Francis says the definition of political efficiency you are quoting, it does not have room in the 21st century. Then the attack on General Katumba Wamala waters down your point. We have some level of insecurity. I agree, there are no angles, no angels, I beg your pardon, but the extent of rot in your government is beyond modern democracy and progress. That is Francis. Miriam says, true, parties have code of conduct and rules. And Francis goes on to say, Ambassador, if we are to transform Uganda, quality and political hygiene is vital and significant building block. The constitution has been abrogated on several occasions. The ruling family has turned it into a royal family. Ambassador, in your wisdom, is the election process in Uganda democratic? I need you to react to those, Ambassador, briefly, and then we get back to you.
Well, Lynn, constitution being abrogated, in my view, I'm one of those who think that the constitution is not cast in stone. If there are provisions in the constitution that have become repugnant, they should be changed yesterday, not even today. They should be changed. Yes, people have been quoting the American Constitution. Fine, that's okay. Which has only been changed once, or is it twice, or something like that. Fine, that's okay. That is America. The Baganda have got a saying that omukisa gw'embwa teguyisa mbuzi mu malagala. I will explain that, the meaning of that probably in the next discussion that we will have. The Americans have had an opportunity. They have had that chance, that they've had that constitution which hasn't been overhauled for probably centuries. Fine, that's okay. But for us, as far as we are concerned, when we discover that certain provisions in the constitution are actually bordering on impeding democracy, we change them. And I don't think this is going to happen only when Museveni is in power. Even subsequent governments will change the constitution as and when they think that it no longer provides the political space that they aspire to have. And so the constitution, yes, abrogation, fine, you can call it abrogation. In the eyes of the UPC in 1966, when the constitution was changed, it wasn't abrogation. It was changed for the benefit of the country, to change the country from a federal system of government to a republic. If it was bad, why don't we have a federal system of government in the country right now? Because we still run a republic. That means that the chua that was given by the UPC government in 1966 has worked up to today, because we have a republic instead of a federal system of government, because you cannot create a state within a state. And so constitutions can be changed. So it was changed, the constitution has changed at that time in 1962 from a federal system, changing those provisions for a federal system of government to a republic. And that has lived up to today. Although, of course, there are sentiments that we should go back to that, we should revert to that federal system of government. But the resistance in the country to reverting to a federal system of government is so strong. That's why it is not succeeding. And that's why I was talking about that critical mass that we need. Whether we are talking about changing the constitution, which others refer to as abrogation, or we are talking about actual dialogue. Do we have the critical mass in the country to agree that, yes, we need a national dialogue? Or actually dialogue can take all sorts of facets, including under IPOD, Parliament, and in the rest of the forums that we can have. So we need to convince as many people. I'm not saying that we should stop dialogue. The dialogue should continue. I have absolutely no problem with dialoguing, because the moment you stop dialoguing is the beginning of chaos in the country, is the beginning of probably rebellion in the country, is the beginning of probably gunhood, so to speak, because there is no word called gunhood, but for purposes of this conversation, yes, I can refer that to gunhood, which probably is also equivalent to rebellion. So discussions must continue, dialogue must continue. Now, where we disagree is at what level? Do we have to waste national resources to call a national dialogue where we call these so-called eminent persons to begin to tell us and dictate to us what the country, which direction the country should take?
Right, Ambassador, I'm sorry to cut you short there. Let's hear from Miriam. Miriam, we understand that some time back at the launch of IPOD, it was thought that IPOD was going to, spearhead the dialogue process in Uganda, national dialogue. But from the look of things, it seems it has failed in a way or the other. And certainly say that Uganda is ripe for dialogue. Will it ever be ripe also? Is another question that pops up. But maybe as you do that, let me quickly read this in the chat room. This is, I beg your pardon. Okay, who's?
Okay, I want to first react to what Ambassador Mayega. Yes, actually, all the democratic process is characterized by dialogue. You can't have democracy unless you have dialogue. But then that means our level of dialogue, or the type of dialogue we have, is determined by the status of democratic institutions we have. And the level of democracy we enjoy in Uganda. But Ambassador Mayega, you know so well, Uganda, when it comes to democracy, we really run short of even qualifying to be called a democratic government. There is no freedom of speech. There is no freedom of assembly as far as opposition political leaders are concerned. There is no free and fair elections. So the parliament, which would have been a dialoguing process, the legislature, the legislative body we have, is not representative of people's interests. And yeah, the iPod process would also have been a process of conversation and consensus. But what do we have? A failed process even on that corner. And that's very, very unfortunate. So all the processes we have, or the institutions that would have enabled the building of consensus as a country, as far as politics is concerned, are all dead. Even civil societies are struggling. There are so many blocks put in by the current government to make sure that every other process is disabled or is so stifled that a rate of communication trickles in as far as political consensus is concerned. And it's the rate even that trickles in is in favor of the ruling party. So there is no dialogue right now. We are there. We are, as Ochieno said, are we waiting for the situation to blow off? It's like a boiling boil, which is about to burst. And should we wait for that burst so that we can talk about? I mean, it's like acting like a fire brigade, just coming to put down the fire instead of preventing the fire from happening. So we love our country so much. If we really, really care, we should put up preventative measures to ensure that we have a smooth, predictable, and stable political processes. And that includes having a national dialogue, having all the democratic institutions operate freely so that we can have communication, continuous interaction, continuous communication. And Ambassador Mayega, you referred to democracy and the multi-party election as a game of numbers that whoever wins, takes it all. That's not true. Democracy is about consensus, and whether it's under multi-party or not, the ruling party has to listen to the minority party. That's why we have leaders of opposition in parliament. That's why we have political parties, and they should be functional. Like Bob Wine should be able to hold a concert in City Square in Kampala any time of the day, as long as he is conducting political business as a leader of a party, which is a lead of opposition group right now. But that can't happen in Uganda. Why is NRM a dictatorship? Your guess is as good as mine. So lack of that discussion, lack of that interaction. We currently don't know what Ugandans are thinking, apart from guessing from like Ochieno said when he was in Sorority. The whispers are there. Me and you, we know what the ordinary person really is talking about. We know what everybody is talking about. We know there are disgruntled in the army. Every other time you see a general, these days, unfortunately, they are going so fast. Every time you see a general leaving us to the next world, you see how much of that dark whispers goes on, how they were disgruntled. Who is behind? Who is not disgruntled today? And what will happen to all this uncertainty that is happening around us if it's not contained, if it's not instead harnessed for the future, for the bright future of Uganda? Discontention is good. If you utilize that discontention and you tap into it, it becomes a vehicle of change, good change, not volatile change where you have coups and political instability. So the national dialogue would be like one of those processes where you tap into that discontent, you tap into those whispers happening behind us, and you harness them to chart the way forward, to see what people are thinking and see what we need to do as a country. The constitution as it is, Ambassador Mayega, it's good you referred to the abrogation of the Ugandan constitution in 1966 by the UPC government. By the time you see a leader touching the constitution, you know something has happened. The Milton Obote and the UPC by that time abrogated the constitution because there was a political consultation between Mengo and the rest of Uganda, the rest of the political Uganda. So that he thought that abrogating the constitution to create the pigeonhole constitution would be a solution. But where did it lead us to? It's like replacing a swollen tire on your car with one with a hole, and you get a flat tire as you drive a few miles away. And that's what happened in 1971. Obote government got bust, and we had a coup of Idi Amin. And the same thing was repeated by Museveni when he, I would like to call it abrogated, when he really unconstitutionally abrogated our 1995 constitution to lift the term limits, and then next to the age limits. Those processes were not constitutionally done. We had the military violence ruling that day, forbidding and beating the opposition leaders, stopping them from consulting the Ugandans. We had so many arrests and so many killings on the street. I mean, every time you see violence on the street, you know Museveni is doing something selfish to the Ugandans. And we have seen that over and over. But this time, by the way, Lynn, when Mao is talking about national dialogue, there is another conversation he's also championing, which is constitutional amendments kind of thing. And he's saying so far 70% of the articles they want amended are already on the table. And guess which is one of those things? I mean, the rest are excuses, but the main thing is pushing forward, or should I say what Museveni is pushing forward, is to amend the constitution so that we have a parliamentary system instead of a presidential system, because he's no longer sure of winning a national presidential election process anytime, whether he rigs or not. So now they want to rig and have majority parliament and then elect the president through the parliament. And that's one of the, and I think that's why they got Mao and put him in that position. It's like trying to cleanse that evil thing. I mean, he's trying to cover up for his evil schemes, and he wants someone who looks like opposition to champion that process. And poor Mao is like the sacrificial lamb, but a willing one at that. So I don't feel sorry for him, but that's what is going to happen. And then that means we are blocking the so-called pathways, which Mayega talked about in our constitution, to ensure peaceful transfer of power. Right now, if Museveni wants to propagate himself to the next presidency, to be a leader after 2026, he has to amend the constitution to make sure that he's not voted for directly by majority Ugandans, because guess what? The majority voters by that time are going to be very young, very youthful, who do not support him at all. So he knows that, and he knows how much he rigged the 2021 election. And genuinely, I'm sure deep in their records, they know the genuine numbers of the voters they have and how much they rigged entrench themselves into power. So the constitution, they are planning further to amend the constitution and to push us to further into a dark corner of politics. How are we going to get out from that? I mean, we can have Museveni die in power, but at what cost, Ambassador Mayega? At what cost will be that to our country, Uganda? So far, we have a struggling economy because we can't have investment. Why? Because people don't know there is political instability. There is uncertainty about the Uganda's political future. So if you are to make a big investment of 20 years plus, how are you sure that your investment is going to be secure going forward if there is political uncertainty? So those things, and then if you really follow the UBO's, the Bureau statistics, the figures, from 2020, 18, 2019 shows that the number of Ugandans who are really poor, below poverty level, has increased, and it continues to increase. We have unemployment. Today, Ambassador Mayega boasts of having a large number of Ugandans, those young girls going into the Middle East to survive because of poverty back home. So those things, so far we have a lot of brain drain. Those people would be staying home and building the economy in Uganda, but they cannot find jobs. The economy, the small economy we have is getting more small, and it cannot absorb the number of skilled manpower we are even producing, however little it is. And that is a cause to worry. Our population is growing so fast, and it's predicted to multiply to double up in 2050. But what about the economy? At what rate is the economy growing? Will it match the population growth? And what will happen to those Ugandans who are really growing up, the young Ugandans? So far, our population below 70% is below 30. They want jobs. They want democracy. They see around us happening. And Uganda, the political environment continues to get worse and worse. We all know that we've lived enough to see how the political space in Uganda is becoming narrower. For instance, there was political violence in that 2010, 15, but the kidnappings are a thing of today. The torturing people to death by the ruling party and the security forces because they are opposition. That's where we are going to now. And it's getting worse and worse. Ochieno referred to the killing in cold blood of 56 plus people and the injuring of more than 200 on Kampala streets in 2020 that nobody wants to talk about. All of us, if we are nationalists, we should be worried if things can get as bad as that and we don't see any sign that they are getting better. How far worse do we want to first drown before we come up and save our country? So when we are talking of national dialogue, Ambassador, it's not because we lean to the opposition. It's because we are looking at Uganda without any party interest. The party interest are minor issues when it comes to the future of Uganda as a nation. Whether you are NRM, when Uganda is unstable, you can't be stable. Whether you are NUP or ANT, like my friend Francis, you can never have peace, you can never invest, you can never go to school when the country is unstable. So the interest of having a stable Uganda is non-partisan, and it concerns all of us. I think at this point, this is the point where we need to put our selfish interests as far as our parties are concerned on the side and think about Uganda as a country and think about the political future of Uganda, the country, whether it's under Museveni or not. I think that the issue of having a national dialogue and listening to each other is long overdue. And Lynn, let me remind you, I think you remember we had Dr. Milton Alimadi. He said that we need Museveni to do a declark. Francis had asked who will lead the process. Museveni can lead the process, be like President de Klerk and realize that you can't push on the apartheid regime and giving way to transition to a more peaceful, a more inclusive government. It's not so hard to do. Museveni can lead that process and say, let's have a national dialogue, let's put down timelines for transition, and I'm going to step down and give way to more Ugandans to come and take charge of the country. He has done whatever he could do, and whether it's bad or good, I think going forward is not taking us anywhere any better than he has already done. We've seen it all, and trust me, it's getting worse. And it's time for him to be stepping aside and letting other people revive the country.
Right. Now, as we have, let me see, we have about 14 minutes to the top of the hour at which we finish the show. But let me quickly get these comments in the chat room. Francis is saying, Ambassador, if we are to transform Uganda, quality and is vital and significant. Oh, I think I read that earlier. He goes on to say, changing them to serve the interest of an individual is egocentric and dangerous helped Uganda such uplifting age and term. I need you to, as we shall hear from Ambassador, we're not hearing you.
Lynn, I didn't get you clearly because I think there were echoes in the studio.
Oh.
Because you were talking about things in the chat room and I didn't get you clear. Not clear.
What I was saying.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Let me read this. It is Francis Action Force in Uganda Democratic, changing them to serve the interest of. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I'm hearing you.
The lifting of the term. Okay, how has the lifting and of the age limit of the term and age limit helped Uganda? Let's cite one achievement in relation to the lifting of the age limit. But as we are winding up, Ambassador, we need you to give us your concluding remarks. And really, is Uganda ripe for dialogue? Are we really set for dialogue?
Well, thank you very much, Lynn, because right from the beginning of this conversation, I think I said I'm one of those who think in terms of dialoguing all the time. So anybody who interrupts dialogue, definitely that is an enemy of the country. There's no doubt about it. Where probably I differ from the rest of my colleagues is at what level this dialogue should be and what should be the agenda. And can those who say there should be a national dialogue really build to what I should call a critical mass of support for that idea? Extremely important for us to take cognizance of that. We need to have an agenda. First of all, the most important one, even before we begin to work out an agenda, is to make sure that we have support across the political spectrum. And that means that we have to scratch our heads and make sure that we convince as many people as possible, all actors, political actors in the country, all political parties, religious leaders, the so-called opinion leaders. Although for me, I don't believe in opinion leaders because I have my opinions. Miriam, you have, Lynn has, Francis has, Joseph has, so I don't believe. But the rest of the leaders, especially those who are considered to be, those who are religious leaders and those who are in the mainstream political parties and active politicians, yes, that one I can agree, because those definitely are much more interested in these things. But for somebody who is referred to as an opinion leader, no, I'm not terribly convinced about. So the question is, do we have the critical mass, first of all, to convince everybody so that we come on table and then discuss these things above the table? That is number two. What is the agenda? Number three, what should be the level of these conversations? So for me, as far as I'm concerned, that's extremely important. But I don't know whether you have enough time so that I can respond, because quite a number of things were said by Miriam and the rest of the colleagues. If you don't have time, then I can rest my case. We can always have another opportunity.
Much time,
No, it's okay. I can give opportunity to others. There is no problem. Let the others have a chance.
Nice.
But otherwise, for me,
no, you can summarize one or two.
Yeah, because there was a reference to the people in the Rwenzururu in Western Uganda. I have lots of information about those groups that were trying to mobilize an army, form a country called Yira Republic, and fight the government of Uganda so that they take swaths of land from the DRC and also from Uganda to create a new state. And the people thought that the government of Uganda would just simply sit idly by as these things were happening, because an army had been recruited and people were actually killing policemen and UPDF officers. These killings were happening and they were the precursors of what happened. And therefore, when the government went in and these people resisted arrest, then fire, of course, had to ensue as a result, because people were armed and they were trying to fight the state. The moment you create a rebellion, definitely the state will come in and it will fight you. Yeah, so that reference to the Rwenzururu, that it was violation of human rights and so on, I don't definitely agree. The moment you become armed, any state which is worth its name, definitely is going to respond most aggressively. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you. Francis, in a bit, we have a few minutes of the hour to wind up. So in your conclusive remarks.
Thank you, Lynn and Miriam, Ambassador Mayega, and Joseph, who just left us shortly, for this conversation. You know, when we talk of democracy, it must be progressive, not retrogressive, as how the democracy ushered in by NRM is doing. Then too, if we want to build and transform the country, it is important dialogue, but it is vital to first set the ground and ensure that the accused is not the judge in the dialogue. So that's why I still think there should be somebody neutral and well respected in as far as mediating these dialogues, and they should be guaranteed that once what we agree on, it will not this time be abrogated. Everyone will be part and partial of it and committed to what we agree. And saying that for a dialogue to take place, we should first have a critical mass from nearly all Ugandans, as how Ambassador Mayega is saying, is self-defeating, because even when you are going to the bush, your government did not first consult every Ugandan. You just saw that the issues were out of hand, and therefore a few came and said, no, I think we should do what by that time they thought was right. It is also important that a few who may agree and see that there is a problem taking place then can have that dialogue, and of course with transparency, and broadcast it as possible, so that every Ugandan now is either listening in or observing what is taking place, as opposed to where Museveni and his regime will dominate everything, and then we don't get the proper and true meaning of a dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis, for that. Miriam, as we wind up conclusively, how do we move forward, really? But let me, actually, your comment, Miriam says, she says, it starts from here, NRM's propaganda, Mr. Mayega, the people of Kasese were protesting the level of poverty and neglect by NRM government. They're still in land etc. You boasted is elected by government. Okay, Miriam, proceed.
Lynn, thank you. Thank you all the panelists, Francis, Ambassador Mayega, and Ochieno, who has left us for this interesting discussion and very timely. But a lot said, though I want to conclude that what Francis and Mayega referred to as how the process should be conducted actually determines the outcome. How would we, Ambassador Mayega said, do we have a consensus that we really need a dialogue? And Francis also referred to who's gonna lead that process in case it's there. But I want to refer to as the most fruitful and last national consultative dialogue that we had as Uganda, which was the constituent assembly, the way they were consulting all Ugandans, including the grassroots level people, ordinary people, about what a type of Uganda they want to see. And they summarized all that into the 1995 Ugandan Constitution. So that process was very, very far-reaching, very, it reached the grassroots, unlike all other processes which have been trying to conduct some kind of consensus building about the future of Uganda. And another process which has been far-reaching and well consulted is the Citizens Manifesto put around by the civil society, which also did a very deep and very consultative and process to gather the views of Ugandans about what the future of Uganda they want to see. So we can always refer to those processes, and we come up with the type of national dialogue and how we should conduct it and who should lead the process. And when we don't need the challenge I had with the IRCU national dialogue, the religious council kind of dialogue, was that it was a process kind of funded by UNDP. We need processes funded by Ugandans, a process for Uganda, generated by Ugandans, funded by Uganda, which is very like organic, which is so national for us, so that we really speak our mind about the future of Uganda we really want to see. It's not who has the gun that they should always control the view of and the opinions of everybody. And this has been the case in Uganda ever since Uganda was formed in 1900. It's who has the gun. At first it was the colonialists, then Obote took over by abrogating the constitution, and then Amin took over with his gun. Then we had Museveni with his gun, and actually it wasn't Museveni who removed Idi Amin. It was a group of so many armed groups, but it's the gun, always the gun, and Museveni is still using the gun to control us. And even how we should lead is still determined by the gun. As you know, it's who has the gun that will win the elections. Even today, when you hear whispers, you hear you can't win without the army support. I mean, we should really get out of that kind of backward politics. And we can have examples like Kenya. I mean, they've moved up and they really, the people govern. The people determine who's going to be the next leader. The process is all embracing, and they are not headed by military. I mean, there is also money influence, but the money is much better than having the military coercion taking control. As long as Uganda is still under the charge of the military, and we still see that military coercion, I mean, the military has only one role in life. They have to kill you and take charge. Once you see anybody with a gun on top, you know they killed someone or suppressed them or coerced them into submission, and they took over from that. That's no better than a military dictatorship. And it's high time we have democratic institutions. It's high time we have Ugandans make the decisions about how they should be governed. And the process should embrace everybody, academia, grassroots, or the civil society, religious leaders, traditional leaders, everybody, including the NRM, Ambassador Mayega. And thank you for always being with us. We really, really appreciate everybody.
Thank you very much, Lynn.
Right. Thank you very much, Miriam. Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you, Francis.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Joseph, for making time and always joining us every other time for these conversations, and they're very important. I wish you all a lovely weekend, and we'll catch you again next time. I hope we'll continue having more conversations, and maybe our country can also pick up on them and, do some dialoguing in the future.